Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today hopefully is going to be the last part of the products feature. We're going to implement the search input and we're going to do the integration test of products view model. Under components, create a new user control. Let's call it search input. As usual, I would like to start from the code behind. It's going to be basically a wrapper around the text field that we have implemented under core UI. As dependency properties, we need query. We need the label for the search input. We're going to add to this search input the progress indicator. We have to add the required width in order to allow the animation. And because we're going to implement the autocomplete here under search input, we have to add the list of the suggestions. All right, let's come back to the search input design and let's add the text field from core UI. The type of this text field is autocomplete. Let's give it a name to handle the animation. The width is going to be from the dependency property. For the autocomplete background color, it has to be a dynamic resource. And let's do here surface. For the background color, it should be surface as well. Let's add the border radius 25. And for the border weight, it has to be 0. Now we have to specify whenever this particular search input or text field has focus changed to basically animate the width of this particular component. I'm gonna copy it, code behind, I'm gonna paste it here. For the highlighted suggested item color, it's gonna be secondary light. And for the selected suggested item color, it's gonna be primary light, or it's primary lighter. Now let's hoist the method suggested item selected under the code behind. I'm gonna rename it to what I've done earlier. Come back to the search input. Now for the suggestions from the dependency property, however, for the mode, it has to be two-way. And for the text, it has to be from the dependency property. However, for the update source trigger should be properly changed, and we have to provide the validates on data error to true, and the mode, it has to be two-way. Now for the trading content, we have to put the progress indicator, the clearable button, and the magnify icon. Therefore, we have to use stack panel to wrap everything in a horizontal sequence. We have to attach the automation ID search input from the constant file. We're gonna put here the progress indicator, which is a circular progress indicator, and it has to be visible according to the value or the state is processing. Therefore, we have to use the Boolean to visibility converter. Let's add here the converter to the resource user control. For the value, it has to be 0, and for the visibility is from the dependency property is processing, and we have to use the converter. This one's a little bit tricky because we have to access the ancestor type. The ancestor type is going to be user control, but not any ancestor type. We have to provide here again the level or the ancestor level. Let's use first of all the visibility. Provide here the binding. The state is processing. For the relative source ancestor type, it has to be user control. Now for the ancestor level, we have to go 2 components upward to access this user control, which is basically the search input. This is the first one. We have to go beyond basically the trading content to access the user control. Therefore, we have to do here 2. And you have to use the converter. Next, it's gonna be the clearable button. I'm gonna wrap this button within a border to make it very easy for us to click on it, because the area of the SVG image, it is small, therefore you have to expand it to a bigger area using border. Let's do, for example, for the width and height 20. Let's add a margin, and the horizontal alignment and vertical alignment should be centered. For the background should be transparent. Let's change the cursor to hand. Now, whenever we click on this particular border, we have to clear the text, change it in the code behind. And this particular clear button should be visible when the query is empty. Therefore, we have to add another converter. Let's call it non-empty string to visibility converter. Empty, all right, we have it. Non-empty string to visibility converter. Let's use it. And we have to use here the visibility according to the query using the converter. Inside, we have to put the SVG image. For the field color, it's gonna be secondary, and the icon should be from image resources. All right, we are done with the clearable button. Gonna fold this section. Next, we have to use a button to represent the magnify icon. Let's make it accessible under our end-to-end test using the automation ID search button. For the height and width, it has to be 20 to match basically the clearable button and the rest of the components. For the background and the brush, it has to be transparent. Let's change, for example, the cursor to hand, just in case. And whenever we click on this particular button, we have to search. Gonna hoist this method. Let's call it on search click. And the code behind, update this name of this function. Now we have to change the template of the button to update the background. Now for the border, background and brush and border thickness, it has to be from the background, border, brush, and border thickness from the template binding. And inside the border, we have to put here the content presenter, whatever we want to do inside the button. All right, I'm going to fold this section of template. What we have to put inside this particular button, we have to put the magnify icon. Next, we have to define the section for the autocomplete data template. And each item should be represented using a component called search suggestions item that we have implemented in other apps. We need to identify each item by its product ID. We need the thumbnail to be displayed under the async image. We need to show the title and the category. That's it for the code behind. Let's come back to the design. Instead of grade, we're going to use the stack panel. The first element should be the async image. I'm going to copy the same async image from the card and use it here. All right, this is the async image. I'm going to fold this section. Nothing substantial here. We have just to use the thumbnail and we have to attach the automation ID suggested product. The second element is going to be placed under vertical sequence to represent the title and the category. Let's place it at the top. It has to be up here, not in the center. We need to show the title and we have to add the automation ID to be accessible under our end-to-end test and the category. All right, that's pretty much it for this suggestion item. Let's use it in the search input. You can see here the layout. For the path, it has to be ID. Let's add some margin for the title and the category from the path. To make it look like a button, let's add the cursor hand, and we have to add here the thumbnail. And for testing purposes, let's add the automation ID. It has to be from the suggested product content description or identifier. And we have to replace the placeholder by the dedicated ID for each item to make it uniquely accessible under the end-to-end test. Now we have to come back to the code behind to start the animation for the search input. Whenever this search input has focus, we're going to animate the container or the search input. Let's check first of all if the sender is a framework element, and we have to store somewhere the original width. Let's store it here under a private member. We have to check first of all if we have a value under original width. Next, we have to capture the original width once on first focus. First of all, we have to check if it is not a number and width, not the actual width, but we have to get the width of this particular element or element and width equals 0. In this case, we have to assign to the original width the value from the actual width. Otherwise, it has to be the width itself. The target animation or the target width, we need to focus to expand it by 150 or 200 according to your liking. If it's not focused, we have to shrink it back to the original width. If has focus, instead of E, I'm gonna call it has focus. If has focus, the original width and value, because it's nullable, let's do 150 for example. Otherwise, it has to be original value of the width or the original width. Now let's define the animation. It's gonna be a double animation. To the target width and duration is gonna be 300 milliseconds or something like this. And the ease in function, ease in out. We have to animate basically the container by doing elements and begin animation, framework, elements, property that we want to animate, which is the width property. We have to pass the animation as an argument. I think that's pretty much it. As I said earlier, we have to hoist those methods. Therefore, I'm gonna create here some public events. We need to pass as an argument a search query, clear, without any parameters, of course. The third event, it's gonna be related to whenever we click on the suggested item, ID of type long, and let's name it suggested product click. And another event, whenever we select a suggested product. On suggested item selected, I'm gonna name it to item. We have to check if the item is a product preview. In this case, we're gonna call the suggested products selected event. On a clear click, we're going to invoke the event clear. On search click, we're going to invoke the event search. I don't think that we're going to need this particular event. On suggested products click, by hoisting the suggested product selected, it's gonna be enough. And that's pretty much it for the search input. I think that we have to implement a search input preview for this. Let's go back to the preview view model. I'm gonna add another state for is searching and another state for the suggestions. Now let's simulate basically whenever this search query changed, we have to filter the list of products using the mock data by using the partial to access basically the changes of the search query. First of all, I'm gonna set is searching to true, and we have to delay the operation by, let's say for example, by 500 milliseconds. Mock data, suggested products, and you have to pass here the value. We have to convert it actually to products preview. Underneath we have to do is searching to false. And we have to simulate basically to clear the search query. And we have to change the state suggested products to empty array. I think that's enough for this view model. Let's switch to the code behind. To use the view model, the data context should be basically the view model. Now let's use the search input. I'm gonna add here some margin in the left corner and vertical alignment top. We can change actually the background. I don't know, let's do blue violet or something like this. All right, now what we have to do here, let's assign the clear function and is processing. It's gonna be from the data context is searching window, the query with the same manner. All right, let's do, for example, 400 vertical alignment top. Next, we need to specify the required width. Let's do 300, for example. The search label. Now for the suggested products selected, I'm gonna handle this under the code behind. And for the suggested products, I think that's pretty much it. Let's come back to the search input code behind to clear the search input, view model and clear. I'm gonna show here a box message and the same. I think that's pretty much it. Let's come back to the main window and add it to the list. Before running the preview, we have to launch basically the command PHP artisan server in order to show the images and make sure that your PHP server and the MySQL server are up and running. All right, let's run the preview. All right, we don't have actually the search label. I think that we have some binding issues. Just delete this. Okay, I'm going to relaunch the application just to see if we do have some other binding issues. This property is not recognized. Oh my god, that was a stupid mistake. I'm sorry. It shouldn't be like this. Oh, damn. Where is the preview? It has to be p state. It's my bad. All right. All right, here are the suggestions. It looks good, actually. The other binding issues are not related to our project. Okay, let's click on this. Navigate into product, sunglasses, which is good. All right, now let's clear the text. Very good. Now let's click on magnify icon. You search for F, for example, which is good. And that's pretty much it. And finally, we are done with product feature. All right, such a relief. Before wrapping up the video, we have to make sure that the view model is working fine. Under integration tests, let's come back to the features test. Under presentation screen, let's add a new class. Let's call it product view model test. And it should inherit from integration tests. First of all, we need the use cases and the view model to test. And let's add the public constructor to assign the output of type itest_output_helper. We need to provide the repository and we can obtain the view model. Now the first test, we need to make sure that getProducts should return success with lists of products previews. Let's arrange the page and we have to use the task completion of type product state because we're going to observe the changes of the product state and we have to set a timeout for this. Now we have to observe the state changes manually by doing view model, and the property changed. Now we have to check for the property of type product state. We have called it actually in the view model state. If the arguments and property name, let's look for its name by using name of view model and state. Now we can store, let's store first of all the state under state. When the page is not loading, we will set the result to the task completion source, and we have to assign as an argument the state. Only if we have some results under the API call. In other words, the products list is not empty. In this case, we're going to set the result to the task completion source, try set result, and pass as an argument state. All right. We didn't act yet. We are just observing the state changes. Now we can act by using view model on event. The type of the event is new get products for the first page. Now it's time for the assertion. I'm going to assert within the timeout. Therefore, we have to store the results under this particular variable from awaiting task, and when any of the task completion source has passed, for example, the timeout 5 seconds, more than enough. If we don't have a result from the task completion source, we're going to throw an exception of type timeout. Now we can store the final state under this task completion source and task. Of course, we don't have turbine under WPF. This is basically what I come up with. Beforehand, we have to arrange here the correct data. First, we have to check if the list of the product is not null by doing final state. Yeah, the final state is nullable here. Let's do product state nullable. Because the final state is nullable, we have to check first of all that this final state is not null. More specifically, the products should not be null. Next, we have to make sure that the list is not empty. And we have to make sure that we have the exact same. I think that's pretty much it for this test. Let's run the test. The test passed. All right, we have the output from the API call. Now we have to check if we are able to get the product detail using load product event. We need to arrange the correct product and the task completion. As we have done earlier, we're going to observe manually the changes of the viewModel.state. Next, we have to act by calling on event new load product, and we have to pass here as an argument the correct product ID, the exception if we have an error. In this particular section, we're going to make sure that we don't have any errors called. By doing exception should be null. If it's not null, we have done something wrong under the implementation. You can pass here a custom message, for example, expected no error when loading products. Now we have to wait for 5 seconds before doing the assertion. We're going to assert that the product should be not null, and we have the correct product detail. That's all for this test. All right, let's run the test. All right, which is good. Test passed. We have the detail of the products here. Now let's test if we have provided the wrong ID. Gonna make sure that we don't have any detail. Let's arrange the non-existing products ID as well as the task and observe the state manually. We are 100% sure that this ID will never exist. And here we have to act actually by doing viewModel on event with the same manner. In this case, we have to make sure that this exception is not null. Afterward, we have to wait for 5 seconds and make the final assertion. We need to make sure that the product is null or the product detail is null. That's pretty much it. Let's run the test. All right, we can see here the 404 not found, which is good. Now let's test for the suggestions of the products. We need to make sure that search suggestions should give suggested products. First things first, we need to arrange the query, where to store the results, and the correct suggestions. And we need the task cancellation source. Now we have to observe manually the changes of the state. Instead of using products, we have to observe basically the suggestions. Let's act by changing the query, which is S. Let's wait for 5 seconds before making the assertion. Now we have to make sure that the final state is not null and the list is not empty. And we need to make sure that the suggested products is equivalent to the correct suggestions. I guess that's all. Let's run a test. All right, very good. As you can see here, the search query has been changed to S, and we have the correct suggestions. That's assuring. Now let's check. Search products should give non-empty products matching the search query. As we have done earlier, we're going to arrange the query to S. Where to store the results? We don't need actually where to store the results. It's not necessary, to be honest. And you have to observe the changes manually of the state products. Now we have to act by doing view, model, and search query equal S or equal query. And we have to call the event or to trigger the event new search products. We have to wait for 5 seconds before making the final assertion. As we have done earlier, we need to make sure that we have the final state is not null and the products is not empty. And basically the products list is equivalent to the list correct products. The only difference between this function and this and the other function gets products is we have to trigger, we have to change the query and we have to trigger the event. Let's run the test. Very good. And for the record, for the test of load product, for detail, because we are caching the product, the view model shouldn't care actually where the data comes from. We only care about the source, which is we have some data to serve to the clients, or we have some data to serve to the view. Now for the last test, we need to make sure that once providing, for example, a non-existing criteria for the search, it's going to give us an empty list. We're going to arrange some non-existing query. We have to arrange again the task completion source and to observe manually the changes under view model. And we're going to do the same thing that we have done earlier, act basically by assigning search query and triggering the event search products. Next, we have to wait for 5 seconds before making the assertion. Now we need to make sure that the products is not null first of all, and the list is empty. And that's all for this test. Let's go ahead and run the test. If the test passed, we're going to run all tests at once to check for interference. As you can see here, under the log, it is empty. All right, let's run all tests. Very good. And that's going to wrap up our product feature. Finally, we are done implementing the product feature. We have done an extensive work under this particular feature. However, for the next feature, it's going to be even crazier than this one for the authentication feature. Speaking of which, for the next tutorial, we're going to implement the domain layer and the data layer, and we have to implement again the testing for our repository. Afterward, we have to do the views and to test the view model, as we have done here. I hope you have learned something new. See you in the next one, and happy coding!